I stared at the manila envelope lying between us on our favorite restaurant table, my hands trembling as they gripped the edge of the white tablecloth. The candlelight that was meant to create a romantic atmosphere for our 10th wedding anniversary now cast menacing shadows across James's face. My husband of a decade had just uttered words that made my world collapse. "I don't love you anymore." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent weeks planning this evening, making reservations at Le Petit Jardin, the same restaurant where he'd proposed. I'd worn the deep blue dress he'd always loved, styled my hair the way he preferred, and even prepared a special anniversary gift. News I'd been holding close to my heart for the past week. Now, here I sat, across from the man I'd shared my life with, watching him slide divorce papers toward me as casually as if he were passing the breadbasket. "Sarah," he said, his voice steady and detached, so unlike the warm tones that had made me fall in love with him years ago. "I think we both know this has been coming. We've grown apart. I need something different. Something different." The words echoed in my mind as I noticed his perfectly pressed suit, the new watch I didn't recognize, and the slight tan line where his wedding ring should have been. How long had he been planning this? How many nights had he lain beside me, knowing he would destroy our marriage on the very evening meant to celebrate it? The restaurant buzzed around us, other couples laughing, clinking glasses, sharing desserts. I thought of all the anniversaries we'd celebrated here. The first year when we could barely afford it but splurged anyway. The 5th, when we'd announced to our families that we were buying our dream house. And now the 10th, where instead of champagne and celebrations, I was being served papers that would end it all. "There's someone else, isn't there?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them, though I already knew the answer. The signs had been there, the late nights at the office, the business trips that seemed to multiply, the new cologne I didn't recognize, the way he'd stopped sharing details about his day. James had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, adjusting his tie as he cleared his throat. "Sarah, I don't think we need to get into that right now. The papers are straightforward. I'm being more than fair with the settlement." Fair. As if putting a price tag on 10 years of shared dreams, inside jokes, family holidays, and intertwined lives could ever be fair. As if choosing our anniversary for this ambush showed any fairness at all. My hand moved instinctively to my stomach, where my unshared news lay hidden. The waiter approached with our appetizers, his cheerful bon appétit jarring against the heavy silence between us. I watched James check his phone for the 3rd time in 10 minutes, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The rushed dinner reservation, his insistence on meeting here rather than celebrating at home, his distracted glances at his watch. "You're meeting her tonight, aren't you?" My voice was barely a whisper, but it might as well have been a shout for how it made him freeze. "After this, after serving me divorce papers on our anniversary, you're going to her?" The slight flush that crept up his neck was all the confirmation I needed. 10 years of marriage had taught me to read every micro-expression on his face. The same face that used to light up when I entered a room, that had pressed against mine as we swayed to our first dance as husband and wife, that had shared thousands of morning coffees and goodnight kisses. I reached for my water glass, needing something to do with my trembling hands. As I lifted it to my lips, a text notification lit up James's phone screen on the table. Even upside down, I could read the name, Amanda. The glass slipped from my fingers, sending water cascading across the pristine white tablecloth and onto the divorce papers. James jumped up, cursing as he snatched the documents away from the spreading puddle. As he stood there, dabbing at the papers with his napkin, I felt a strange calm settle over me. I had a choice to make in this moment. I could crumble, as he clearly expected me to, or I could show him exactly who he was walking away from. I reached into my purse and pulled out the small wrapped package I'd brought for our anniversary. "I have something for you too, James," I said, my voice steadier than I thought possible. "I think you should open it before you leave." He stared at the gift, confusion crossing his features. This wasn't how he'd expected the evening to go. He'd prepared for tears, for pleading, for anger, but not for this quiet confidence that was somehow rising from my shattered heart. James took the package with obvious reluctance, his fingers brushing against the silver wrapping paper as if it might burn him. I watched his face, the face I'd memorized over a decade of mornings and nights, as he slowly began to unwrap it. My mind drifted to how different this evening was supposed to be, how I'd imagined this moment playing out just hours ago. I thought back to this morning, when I'd stood in front of our bedroom mirror, practicing how I'd tell him about the baby. After 3 years of trying, after countless disappointments and 2 heartbreaking miscarriages, we'd finally succeeded. The irony of timing wasn't lost on me. Just when he'd decided to end everything, I'd discovered we'd created something new. "Sarah," he started, hesitating with the half-unwrapped gift. "We don't have to do this. The gift, I mean. It'll just make things more difficult." "Open it," I insisted, my voice carrying a strength I didn't know I possessed. "Consider it a parting gesture." The words tasted bitter in my mouth, but I kept my composure. Years of working as a corporate mediator had taught me how to maintain a calm exterior, even when my world was imploding. As he continued unwrapping, I couldn't help but remember how we'd met. It hadn't been some romantic chance encounter. We'd been opposing lawyers on a corporate merger case. He'd been brilliant, ruthless even, but there had been something about the way he smiled apologetically after our heated debates that had drawn me in. I'd admired his drive, his ambition. Now I wondered if that same ambition had driven him right into someone else's arms. The restaurant's soft music played on, a jazz rendition of "The Way You Look Tonight," the song we'd danced to at our wedding. I watched as James finally removed the wrapping paper completely, revealing the leather portfolio I'd had specially made. His brow furrowed as he opened it, and I saw the exact moment confusion turned to understanding. Inside were documents of my own, not divorce papers, but rather the results of my investigation over the past 3 months. Bank statements, email transcripts, photos taken by a private investigator I'd hired after finding a suspicious receipt in his jacket pocket. I'd wanted to be wrong so desperately that I'd convinced myself I was paranoid, until I wasn't. "What is this?" His voice had lost its practiced steadiness, replaced by something closer to panic. "I believe you lawyers call it discovery," I replied, taking a sip of my water. "You see, James, while you were planning to ambush me with divorce papers, I was building a case of my own. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the money being funneled out of our joint accounts? That I wouldn't eventually discover your private account in the Cayman Islands?" His face paled as he flipped through the pages. I'd arranged them chronologically, first the small discrepancies, then the larger withdrawals, and finally, the smoking gun. Documentation of the $2 million he'd embezzled from his own law firm, using our joint accounts to launder the money before moving it offshore. "You've always underestimated me, James," I continued, watching him grow increasingly agitated. "Maybe because I left corporate law to become a mediator, you thought I'd lost my edge. Or maybe you just stopped seeing me altogether. But I never lost my instincts." He closed the portfolio with shaking hands, looking around nervously as if suddenly aware we were in public. "This is blackmail," he whispered harshly. I shook my head, feeling an odd sense of calm. "No, this is leverage. You see, I have copies of everything in that folder in 3 separate secure locations. If you proceed with this divorce the way you've planned, trying to leave me with virtually nothing while you run off with your girlfriend and your stolen millions, those documents will find their way to the managing partners at your firm, and to the relevant authorities." The waiter appeared with our main courses, and I couldn't help but appreciate the timing. "The salmon for me," I said pleasantly, "and the steak for my husband." The normalcy of the moment seemed to heighten the tension between us. James waited until the waiter left before leaning forward, his voice urgent and low. "What do you want?" Originally, I wanted my husband back. I wanted the man who used to bring me coffee in bed every Sunday morning, who held my hand through 2 miscarriages, who promised to love me forever. I cut a perfect bite of salmon, maintaining my composure. But now I want what's fair. And I want you to understand exactly what you're walking away from. I reached into my purse and pulled out a second envelope, smaller than the one containing his divorce papers. This was the real anniversary gift I'd planned to give him, before I'd discovered I needed a backup plan. My hand trembled slightly as I placed it on the table between us. "Open this one too," I said softly. Then we can discuss the terms of our divorce." His face had lost all color now. The confident man who'd walked into the restaurant ready to end our marriage replaced by someone who looked trapped and desperate. As he reached for the second envelope, his phone buzzed again. Another message from Amanda, no doubt wondering why he was running late. The weight of my unshared news pressed against my consciousness, making this moment even more surreal. I watched as he began to open the second envelope, knowing that its contents would change everything. Again. But this time, I was the one in control of the narrative. James's hands shook as he opened the second envelope. I watched his face transform as he pulled out the contents. A series of photographs that told another story entirely. They showed Amanda, his perfect girlfriend, meeting with other men in various upscale hotels over the past month. The final photo showed her accepting an envelope from a man I recognized as a partner at our biggest rival law firm. "She's been selling information about your cases," I said quietly, cutting another piece of salmon. "Apparently, you're not the only one who's good at hiding things. I discovered it while I was investigating you. Ironic, isn't it?" He stared at the photos, his face a mix of disbelief and growing anger. "This can't be." "She wouldn't." "She would, and she did. The money you think you've cleverly hidden in the Caymans? She's known about it for weeks. In fact, she's been documenting everything, building her own insurance policy. Did you really think a first-year associate suddenly became interested in a married partner twice her age out of pure attraction?" The steak on his plate remained untouched as he shuffled through the photos again, his lawyer's mind obviously racing to calculate the implications. Each image was dated and time-stamped, showing Amanda in serious discussion with our firm's competitors. "I have to admit," I continued, "finding out about her other activities was an unexpected bonus. I'd hired the investigator to track your movements, but he caught something far more interesting. It seems your girlfriend has been playing a longer game than either of us suspected." The jazz band in the corner started playing "What a Wonderful World," and I almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. Here we sat, in the restaurant where our story began, dismantling the elaborate web of lies our marriage had become. "Why are you showing me this?" James finally asked, his voice hoarse. "You could have just turned everything over to the firm, had both of us arrested." I set down my fork and looked directly into his eyes, the eyes I'd once thought I could read so well. "Because despite everything, I remember who you used to be. The man who spent 3 days by my hospital bed during the first miscarriage, who learned to cook Italian food just because it was my favorite, who once stood in this very restaurant and promised to love me forever." My hand instinctively moved to my stomach again, but I forced it back to the table. Now wasn't the time for that revelation. "I'm showing you this because I'm giving you a choice, James. The same courtesy you didn't give me when you walked in here tonight." He glanced at his phone, which had been suspiciously quiet since I'd revealed the photos. "She's probably wondering why I'm late," he said, almost to himself. "Oh, she knows exactly why you're late," I replied. "The investigator is with her right now, showing her copies of these same photos. I scheduled it precisely for this moment. I thought it was only fair that we both face the truth about who we've been sleeping next to at the same time." James's face drained of what little color it had left. "You've thought of everything, haven't you? I learned from the best. All those years watching you in court, seeing how you built your cases layer by layer. I paid attention." I took a sip of water, wishing it were wine. "So here's what's going to happen. You have 2 options." I pulled out a third envelope. I'd come prepared for every contingency, and placed it next to the others. "Option 1. You sign these papers instead of your divorce agreement. They detail a post-nuptial agreement that protects both of us. You'll transfer half of everything, including your offshore accounts, into my name. You'll resign from the firm citing personal reasons before any of this comes to light. We'll proceed with a quiet, amicable divorce, and you'll walk away with your reputation and freedom intact." He reached for the envelope, but I held on to it for a moment longer. "Option 2. You can try to proceed with your original plan, but the moment you do, copies of everything, the embezzlement documents, the proof of your affair, and evidence of Amanda's corporate espionage, will be sent to the managing partners, the Bar Association, and the FBI." The band finished their song, and in the momentary silence, I could hear James's ragged breathing. He was doing what he always did, calculating odds, weighing outcomes, looking for a loophole. "Why would you protect me?" he finally asked. "After what I've done." I thought about the baby, about the future I'd imagined for us just that morning. Because burning everything to the ground won't give me what I really want. And what's that? A clean break. A chance to start over without the shadow of scandal or public humiliation. And I paused, choosing my next words carefully. Because despite everything, I believe people can change. Even you, James. Maybe losing everything you've schemed for will teach you something about what really matters. His phone buzzed again. Not a text this time, but a call from Amanda. We both stared at the screen until it went dark. The moment felt heavy with endings and beginnings, with choices that would ripple out far beyond this candlelit table. "You have until the dessert course to decide," I said, gesturing to the waiter for more water. "The same amount of time you gave me to process those divorce papers. Seems fair, doesn't it?" The silence between us stretched as James stared at the 3 envelopes on the table. His divorce papers, now water-stained, the photos of Amanda's betrayal, and my post-nuptial agreement. His phone had gone silent after 3 missed calls from Amanda. I imagined her across town, facing her own moment of reckoning with the private investigator. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said, breaking the silence. "I actually came here tonight planning to fight for our marriage. I had this whole speech prepared about second chances and remembering why we fell in love." I laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. I guess we both had different surprises planned. James loosened his tie, a gesture I'd seen countless times before important court appearances. "When did you figure it out? About the money? Remember that weekend you went on your fishing trip with the partners?" I had that stomach flu, so I stayed home. I took another sip of water, remembering that weekend vividly. It was just before I'd started suspecting I was pregnant. I was looking for some insurance paperwork in your office and found a flash drive that wasn't password protected. "Sloppy of you, really." He winced at that. "I never meant for any of this to happen, Sarah. The money, it started small, just a little creative accounting to cover some gambling debts. But then it grew, and I couldn't stop. And Amanda," he trailed off, looking lost, "became both your salvation and your downfall?" I finished for him. "She made you feel powerful again, didn't she? The young, admiring associate, so impressed by the brilliant partner. Except she was playing you the whole time." The waiter approached with the dessert menu, and I waved him away. This moment didn't need the added irony of sharing creme brulee while dismantling our marriage. "I'll sign your agreement," James said finally, his voice hollow. "You've thought of everything, haven't you? The timing, the evidence, even making sure Amanda can't warn me or try to spin this her way." I pulled out a pen, the Mont Blanc I'd given him for our 5th anniversary, and placed it beside the post-nuptial agreement. "I learned from watching you destroy people in court. You always said timing was everything." As he reached for the pen, his hand trembling slightly, I felt a sudden wave of nausea that had nothing to do with nerves. Morning sickness, I realized, didn't care about dramatic confrontations or life-changing moments. "There's something else you should know," I started, but was interrupted by a commotion at the restaurant entrance. We both turned to look, and I felt my carefully constructed plan begin to unravel. Amanda stood in the doorway, her face tear-streaked but determined, clutching a manila envelope of her own. Behind her was Thomas Chen, the managing partner of our firm. The private investigator I'd hired was there too, looking apologetic as he caught my eye across the room. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Harrison," he called out. "She insisted on coming here, threatened to call the police if we tried to stop her." James half rose from his chair, his face a mask of confusion and fear. "Tom, what are you doing here?" Thomas Chen's expression was grim as he approached our table. "Sit down, James. Ms. Parker here has just shared some very interesting information about firm finances. Information that, if true, requires immediate attention." I felt my perfect plan crumbling around me. Amanda wasn't supposed to go to the firm. She was supposed to run, to protect herself, just like any other self-interested betrayer would do. I hadn't counted on her having an attack of conscience at the worst possible moment. I couldn't do it, Amanda said, her voice carrying across the now silent restaurant. I couldn't let you take the fall alone, James. Not even after what you did to me. The other diners were openly staring now, their own romantic evenings forgotten in favor of the drama unfolding before them. I saw phones being raised, recording what was quickly becoming a social media spectacle. My hand moved to my stomach again, this time protectively. In trying to orchestrate the perfect confrontation, I'd failed to account for the most unpredictable element of all: human emotion. Amanda's conscience, James's shame, and my own secret were about to collide in a way I hadn't planned for. Thomas Chen's eyes swept over the documents spread across our table, lingering on the photos of Amanda with the rival firm's partners. I think, he said slowly, that we should continue this discussion somewhere more private. But before any of us could move, James did something I never expected. He began to laugh, a desperate, broken sound that seemed to bubble up from somewhere deep inside him. You know what's truly ironic? He said, looking at me with tears in his eyes. I actually came here tonight planning to confess everything. The divorce papers were real, but they weren't meant to be a surprise. I wanted to come clean, to face the consequences. I couldn't bear to see the look in your eyes when you learned what I'd become. The restaurant had become unnaturally quiet, with only the soft jazz playing in the background and the occasional click of a phone camera breaking the silence. I looked at the faces surrounding our table. James, broken and laughing. Amanda, tear-stained but determined. Thomas Chen, grave and professional. And the growing crowd of onlookers capturing every moment of our personal tragedy. 10 years of marriage, and it was ending in a public spectacle. Everyone, please. Thomas Chen's authoritative voice cut through the tension. This is a private matter that requires discretion. He turned to the restaurant manager who had appeared at his elbow. Is there perhaps a private room where we can discuss this? But I remained seated, suddenly feeling the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. No, I said firmly, surprising everyone. No more private rooms, no more secrets. I turned to James, who had stopped laughing and was now watching me with a mix of fear and something else. Was it relief? You wanted to confess? I asked him. Then confess. Right here, right now. Because I'm done hiding things too. Amanda stepped forward, clutching her envelope like a shield. Sarah, you don't understand. James didn't what? I cut her off, rising from my chair. The nausea was back, but I forced it down. Didn't mean to steal from the firm? Didn't mean to have an affair? Didn't mean to serve me divorce papers on our anniversary? My voice cracked on the last word, the first real sign of emotion I'd shown all evening. The money, James said quietly, was for you. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out another envelope. There seemed to be no end to the papers destroying our lives tonight. After the second miscarriage, I saw what it did to you, how desperately you wanted a child. I started embezzling to pay for private fertility treatments, experimental procedures, anything that might give us a chance. He pushed the envelope across the table. The divorce papers. I thought if I left now, before you found out what I'd done, you'd be protected when it all came out. I stared at the envelope, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach again. The movement wasn't lost on Amanda, whose eyes widened in sudden understanding. Oh my God, she whispered. You're pregnant. The restaurant erupted in murmurs. I saw phones being lowered as people finally realized they were intruding on something too private, too raw for social media entertainment. Thomas Chen took a step back, his legal concerns momentarily overshadowed by the human drama unfolding before him. 3 months, I said, my voice barely audible. I found out last week. I was going to tell you tonight, James. Before, I gestured helplessly at the chaos around us. James staggered back as if physically struck, gripping the edge of the table for support. We're having a baby, I finished. The last round of treatments worked. The ones I didn't know you were stealing money to pay for. The irony of it all hit me then. The magnitude of our mutual deceptions. Each of us thinking we were protecting the other. Each of us wrong in our own way. I started to laugh, then cry, then both at once. Sarah. Amanda stepped forward again, but this time her voice was gentle. The information I gathered about the firm, I wasn't selling it. I was building a case against Harrison and Chen's discrimination against women in the workplace. The meetings you photographed? Those were with employment lawyers and women's rights advocates. I blinked at her through my tears. But the money transfers were payments to a legal defense fund, she finished. When I discovered what James was doing with the fertility treatments, I realized it was part of a bigger pattern. The firm has been systematically denying coverage for women's health issues while covering everything for the male partners. I was building a class action case. Thomas Chen cleared his throat. Perhaps now would be a good time to mention that the managing board has been investigating these allegations internally for the past month. The room spun slightly, and I gripped the back of my chair. Everything I thought I knew, every careful plan I'd made, was shifting like sand beneath my feet. James's crimes had been committed out of desperate love, not greed. Amanda's betrayal was actually a fight for justice. And I was standing in the middle of it all, carrying a child we'd both sacrificed everything to create. The fertility treatments weren't just denied coverage, James said quietly. They were actively discouraged. The firm has an unwritten policy against female partners taking extended medical leave. When we lost the second baby, and you wanted to try again, I couldn't bear to tell you that pursuing treatment might cost you your partnership track. I looked at the man I'd married, really looked at him for the first time that night. Behind the expensive suit and carefully crafted facade, I saw someone who'd made terrible choices for what he thought were the right reasons, just like I had. So, what happens now? I asked, looking around at the faces that had become entangled in our web of secrets and good intentions. Where do we go from here? The restaurant manager appeared with a set of keys, gesturing toward a door near the kitchen. The wine cellar, he said quietly. Private, comfortable seating. No charge, of course. 5 minutes later, we sat around a heavy wooden table surrounded by racks of expensive wine I couldn't drink. The irony wasn't lost on me. All these bottles meant for celebration, witnessing instead the careful dismantling of lives and lies. Let me make sure I understand everything, Thomas Chen said, his legal pad already half full of notes. James embezzled money to pay for fertility treatments that should have been covered by the firm's insurance. Amanda discovered this while building a discrimination case against the firm. And Sarah, he looked at me with what might have been admiration, investigated both of them, thinking she was uncovering something entirely different. And now I'm pregnant, I added, the words still feeling strange on my tongue. With a baby conceived using treatments paid for with stolen money, while investigating my husband for what I thought was an affair and embezzlement for personal gain, which was actually discovered by his supposed mistress, who was really building a legal case against systematic discrimination that caused this whole mess in the first place. James made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. When you put it that way, it sounds absurd, I finished. Like something out of a soap opera. Amanda pulled out her own files, more documentation of the firm's discriminatory practices spanning the past decade. The affair wasn't real, she said softly. We met for coffee once to discuss the case. Someone took photos and we decided to let people think what they wanted. It gave us cover for meeting to discuss the investigation. You could have told me, I said to James, the hurt in my voice surprising even me, about any of it. The treatments, the money, the discrimination. We used to tell each other everything. When did that stop? He asked, and the question hung heavy in the air. When did we start thinking we had to protect each other instead of fighting our battles together? I thought about it, really thought about it. Maybe after the second miscarriage, I said slowly. We both retreated into ourselves. You threw yourself into work, and you left corporate law to become a mediator, he finished. I thought you were running away from the stress, but you were running toward something else, weren't you? I nodded. I wanted to help people find middle ground, to stop seeing everything as a battle to be won. The irony is, the first time I really needed those skills, I chose investigation and confrontation instead of mediation. Thomas Chen cleared his throat. As fascinating as this personal revelation is, we still have several legal issues to address. The embezzlement can be repaid, James interrupted. Every penny of it went to the fertility treatments. I have records of everything. The discrimination case, Chen continued, has enough evidence to go to trial, Amanda interjected, pushing her files toward him, or to force meaningful change within the firm without public exposure. And the baby, I added, my hand resting on my stomach, who was created in the middle of all this chaos, without even knowing they were the center of it. The silence that followed was heavy with possibility. I looked at James, really looked at him, and saw not the man who'd handed me divorce papers hours ago, but the one who'd been willing to commit crimes to give us a chance at having a child, who'd planned to sacrifice our marriage to protect me from the consequences of his actions. We need time, I said finally, speaking to everyone but looking at James. Time to figure out what this all means, how we move forward. The firm's reputation, Chen began, but I cut him off, will survive if you do the right thing. Institute the policy changes Amanda's research shows are needed. Make restitution for past discrimination. Be better. And us? James asked quietly. What about us? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past few hours, of the past few years, really, pressing down on me. I don't know, I answered honestly. We've both made mistakes, big ones. We've both broken trust and kept secrets, but we're also about to have something we've wanted desperately for years. A baby, he whispered, and I saw tears in his eyes. A second chance, I corrected. The question is, do we want to take it? Amanda stood up, gathering her files. I should go. You two have a lot to talk about. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, everything I learned while investigating this case, you two still love each other. Maybe that's worth fighting for. As she and Thomas Chen left the wine cellar, I found myself alone with James for the first time since he'd handed me those divorce papers upstairs. The papers that now seemed like they belonged to a different lifetime. I didn't sign them, I said suddenly. Your divorce papers. They're still sitting on that table upstairs, probably soaked through with water. I didn't sign your post-nuptial agreement either, he replied. Or confess to the embezzlement officially. We're still in limbo. Maybe that's where we need to be right now, I said. In between what was and what could be, while we figure out what we really want. The wine cellar's soft lighting cast shadows across James's face as he leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Tell me about the baby, he said softly. How did you find out? How are you feeling? The gentleness in his voice, the same tone he'd used during our previous pregnancies, made my throat tight. I took the test last Tuesday, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. After feeling sick for a few mornings, I didn't want to believe it at first. After everything we've been through, the doctor confirmed it 2 days ago. And you were going to tell me tonight. It wasn't a question. While I was planning to serve me divorce papers, I finished for him. Yes, I had it all planned out. I was going to order champagne, then refuse it when it came. Let you figure it out. I laughed softly. I even practiced in front of the mirror this morning, trying to find the perfect way to tell you. He reached across the table, hesitating before touching my hand. When I didn't pull away, he covered it with his. I've made such a mess of everything. We both have, I corrected. You with your illegal crusade for fertility treatments, me with my investigation and schemes for revenge. We became so focused on protecting each other that we forgot how to trust each other. A noise from upstairs reminded us that the restaurant was still operating, that life was going on above us while we sat in this underground room trying to piece our lives back together. We need to make some decisions, I said, slipping back into mediator mode. Practical ones, before we can even think about the bigger questions. James nodded, pulling out his phone and opening his notes app, a habit from countless legal negotiations. The firm, he started. We'll need your resignation, I finished. Even with the context, you still committed a crime. Thomas Chen might be willing to handle it quietly given the circumstances and Amanda's case, but you can't stay. I know. He typed something quickly. The money needs to be repaid. We can sell the lake house, I suggested, and cash in the investments from my inheritance. It should cover most of it. His head snapped up. Sarah? No. That's your money, your safety net. Especially now with the baby. Our baby, I corrected firmly. And what kind of safety net would it be if their father went to prison for embezzlement? We do this together or not at all? He stared at me for a long moment before adding it to his notes. The house? I think we should stay there for now at least. Separate bedrooms until we figure things out, but I placed my free hand on my stomach. This baby deserves a chance at a stable home, whatever we decide about us. And us? His voice was barely a whisper. What do we do about us? I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. I think we need help, professional help, both individually and as a couple, if we decide to try to save this marriage. We've spent too long hiding things, protecting each other from truths we thought would hurt too much. We need to learn how to be honest again. Couples counseling, he said, typing it down. Individual therapy. Anything else? Time, I said firmly. We need time. No quick decisions, no dramatic gestures. We take it day by day, focusing on the practical things first. Your resignation, repaying the money, preparing for the baby. We need to build trust again before we can decide if there's something here worth saving. James set down his phone and pulled out his wallet, removing his wedding ring from where he'd apparently been carrying it. He placed it on the table between us. I took it off 3 days ago, when I decided to go through with the divorce. It felt wrong, wearing it while planning to end everything. I looked at the gold band, remembering the day I'd slipped it on his finger, both of us so young and certain about our future. Keep it, I said finally. Not to wear, not yet, but as a reminder of what we're trying to decide, whether we want to build something new or let go of what we had. A knock at the door interrupted us. The restaurant manager looked apologetic. I'm sorry, but we're closing soon. Your table upstairs. Would you like us to pack up your meals? I realized I was starving. I'd barely touched my salmon during all the revelations and confrontations. Yes, please, I said, then turned back to James as the manager left. We should go home, start figuring out how to live in this new reality we've created. As we stood to leave, James hesitated. Sarah, thank you for not signing those divorce papers. For being willing to at least consider... I'm not doing it for you, I interrupted. Or even for us. I'm doing it for this baby, who deserves parents who at least tried to fix what was broken, who did everything they could to create a healthy home, even if that ultimately means separate ones. He nodded, understanding. As we climbed the stairs back to the main restaurant, I felt the weight of all our revelations, all our mistakes and secrets, and desperate attempts to protect each other. But I also felt something else. Something I hadn't expected when I'd walked into the restaurant hours ago. Hope. The drive home was silent, our takeout containers sitting forgotten in the back seat. The familiar streets seemed different somehow, as if the revelations of the evening had changed not just us, but the whole world around us. When we pulled into our driveway, neither of us moved to get out of the car. I had a bag packed, James said suddenly. In the trunk. I was planning to go to a hotel after everything. And now? He gripped the steering wheel, though the engine was off. Now I don't know. Nothing is what I thought it was 4 hours ago. I looked at our house, the colonial we'd bought 5 years ago, with its perfect front porch and window boxes I'd filled with flowers each spring. How many dreams had we packed into this space? How many tears had these walls absorbed during our failed attempts to have a baby? Use the guest room, I said finally. We need to figure out how to coexist while we work through this. Running away won't solve anything. Inside, the house felt both familiar and strange. The dining room table still held my laptop and case files, evidence of my investigation into what I'd thought was simple betrayal. The kitchen counter displayed the prenatal vitamins I'd started taking, no longer a secret I had to hide. I'll make some tea, James offered, moving toward the kitchen with the awkwardness of a guest in his own home. I should call my mother, I replied. She's expecting a very different kind of update about tonight. I paused at the foot of the stairs. James, when you make your resignation call to Thomas Chen tomorrow, tell him I'll be taking a leave of absence. I need time to figure out my own role in all of this. He nodded, understanding the implications. As I climbed the stairs, I heard him filling the kettle, the familiar domestic sound at odds with the upheaval of our lives. In our bedroom, my bedroom now, I supposed, I sat on the edge of the bed and finally called my mother. Sarah? How did the anniversary dinner go? Did you tell him about the baby? I took a deep breath. Mom, I need you to sit down. What I'm about to tell you, it's complicated. As I recounted the events of the evening, leaving out the specific details of James's crimes and Amanda's investigation, I heard my mother's gasps and exclamations. When I finished, the silence on the line was heavy. Oh, sweetheart, she finally said. What do you need? The question broke something in me. Tears I'd been holding back all evening finally spilled over. I don't know, Mom. I don't know anything anymore. Everything I thought I knew was wrong, but finding out the truth doesn't actually make it better. Do you still love him? Yes, I whispered. That's what makes this so hard. If he'd just been cheating, if he'd just been stealing for himself, but he did it for us, for this baby we've wanted so desperately. How do I reconcile that? A soft knock at the door interrupted us. James stood there with 2 mugs of tea, looking uncertain. Mom, I have to go. I'll call you tomorrow. I ended the call and nodded for James to enter. He handed me a mug, chamomile with honey, the same tea he'd made during my previous pregnancies. The familiarity of the gesture made my chest ache. I just got off the phone with Thomas Chen, he said, sitting in the armchair across from the bed. He's calling an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. With Amanda's evidence and my confession, they're going to announce a complete overhaul of the firm's policies. Health coverage, maternity leave, partnership track requirements, everything. So some good comes from all this, I said softly. Sarah, about the fertility treatments. He stared into his tea. I know what I did was wrong, but sitting in all those doctor's appointments with you, watching you try to be strong every time we got bad news, I would have done anything to give you this baby. That's the problem, isn't it? I met his eyes. You would have done anything, and you did. You broke the law, risked your career, our future. And I gestured to the files still scattered on my desk. I turned into someone I never thought I could be, all because we stopped talking to each other. He nodded slowly. When did that happen? When did we stop being partners and start being each other's secrets? I think, I said carefully. It happened so gradually we didn't notice. Each disappointment, each setback. We thought we were protecting each other, but we were really just building walls. The baby chose that moment to make its presence known with another wave of nausea. James instinctively moved toward me, then stopped himself, uncertain of his place in this new dynamic. It's okay, I said, breathing through the queasiness. You can still care. We can still care about each other while we figure this out. He sat beside me on the bed, careful to maintain some distance. I've been thinking about what you said about therapy. I found a counselor who specializes in couples dealing with infertility trauma. She also does individual sessions. You've been researching therapists tonight? He smiled slightly. Seemed more productive than sitting in the guest room staring at the ceiling. The normality of the moment, sitting together, drinking tea, making plans, felt surreal after everything that had happened. Yet here we were, trying to find a way forward through the wreckage of our secrets. One day at a time, I reminded both of us. We deal with the practical things first. Your resignation, the money, the firm's changes. Then we start the harder work. The emotional work, he agreed. Learning to trust again. Learning to talk again. I set down my tea and turned to face him fully. I need you to promise me something. Whatever happens between us, whatever we decide about our marriage, this baby deserves parents who respect each other, who can model healthy relationships, even if they're not together. I promise, he said solemnly. No more secrets. No more trying to handle everything alone. Whether we save this marriage or not, we're in this together for our child. 6 weeks had passed since that night at Le Petit Jardin. The restaurant's owner had sent us a bottle of sparkling cider, a knowing gesture that made me smile despite everything. It sat unopened on our kitchen counter, a reminder of how much had changed since our anniversary dinner. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying my reflection as I got ready for our first couples therapy session. The slight swell of my belly was becoming noticeable now, at least to me. James had moved from the guest room to the finished basement, giving us both space while keeping him close enough to help when morning sickness hit. or when we needed to talk. "Sarah?" His voice came from downstairs. "We should leave in 15 minutes to make it on time." "Coming," I called back, taking one last look at myself. The woman in the mirror looked different from the one who'd planned an elaborate revenge scheme 6 weeks ago. Maybe it was the pregnancy, or maybe it was the weight of everything we'd learned about each other. Downstairs, James was reviewing some papers, documentation for the financial restitution plan we'd worked out with the firm. The lake house had sold quickly, and my inheritance would cover the rest. Thomas Chen had been true to his word about handling things quietly, though the firm's sudden policy changes had certainly raised eyebrows in legal circles. "Ready?" James asked, looking up. He'd changed too over these weeks. The expensive suits had given way to casual clothes, and he'd started growing a beard. Sometimes I caught him staring at my stomach with a mix of joy and regret, happiness about the baby warring with guilt over how we'd gotten here. The drive to Dr. Patterson's office was quiet, but not uncomfortable. We'd learned to exist in these silences, to let them be peaceful rather than loaded with unspoken accusations. The past 6 weeks had been about small steps, sharing meals occasionally, attending doctor's appointments together, working side by side to deal with the practical aftermath of our choices. "I saw Amanda yesterday," I said as we parked, "at the coffee shop near the courthouse." James tensed slightly, then consciously relaxed. We'd agreed to be honest about everything, no matter how uncomfortable. "How is she?" "Good. The firm's changes are being implemented faster than expected. She's heading the committee overseeing the new policies." I paused. "She asked about you. About us." He turned off the engine but didn't move to get out. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that we're working through things, that we don't know where we'll end up, but we're trying to do it right this time." Dr. Patterson's waiting room was warm and inviting, with comfortable chairs and soft lighting. As we sat waiting for our appointment, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The anniversary dinner that was supposed to end our marriage had instead forced us to face all the ways we'd failed each other, and all the ways we might still save something worth saving. "James?" I said quietly, watching other couples come and go. "Do you remember what you said to me when you proposed? Right here in this city, 10 years ago?" He looked surprised but nodded. "I said that love wasn't just about the big moments, the proposals, the weddings, the anniversaries. It was about choosing each other every day, especially on the days when it's hardest. We stopped choosing each other," I said softly. "We started choosing secrets instead, choosing protection over partnership. And now?" I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling the flutter of movement that had recently started. "Now we're choosing to try, to be honest, to do the work, to figure out if what we had is worth saving or if we need to build something new." "Sarah Harrison?" Dr. Patterson appeared in the doorway, smiling warmly. "James, please come in." As we stood to follow her, James gently touched my elbow. "Whatever happens in there, whatever we decide in the coming months, I want you to know that I'm grateful. Not for how we got here. I'll always regret the choices I made that hurt us both, but grateful that you're willing to try, to see if there's still something worth fighting for." I thought about the unsigned divorce papers, still sitting in my desk drawer at home. About the wedding ring James carried in his wallet. Not worn, but not discarded either. About the baby growing inside me, created from both desperate love and terrible choices. "One day at a time," I reminded him, echoing the phrase that had become our mantra. "Today, we choose to be here, to be honest, to try. Tomorrow we'll choose again." We followed Dr. Patterson into her office, ready to begin the real work of healing. The future was uncertain. Our marriage might be saved, or we might find that the best path forward was apart. But as I sat down beside James, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel 6 weeks ago. Peace with that uncertainty. Whatever happened, we would face it together. Not as the people who'd sat in that restaurant 6 weeks ago, armed with secrets and schemes, but as two people who'd learned the hard way that love without honesty isn't really love at all. And maybe that understanding, that commitment to truth no matter how difficult, was the real anniversary gift we'd needed all along.